In May 1453, prostitutes from the streets of Segovia stood before bishops and nobles in an ecclesiastical court. Their mission, to testify that they had successfully bedded the Prince of Castile, the future King Henry IV. This wasn't a scandal being exposed. This was the prince's own defense strategy. Meanwhile, in the same courtroom, Princess Blanche of Navarre was forced to undergo a physical examination by church matrons. After 13 years of marriage to one of Europe's most powerful princes, she had to prove she was still a virgin. The bishops confirmed it. Not once in over 4,000 nights had her husband touched her. This wasn't happening in some backwater court. This was the Royal Tribunal of Castile, one of medieval Europe's rising powers. And the man at the center of it all wasn't denying his failure. He was using it as evidence. Henry claimed he could perform with prostitutes, but not with his wife. His explanation, witchcraft, a curse that affected him only in the marriage bed. The official record called it impotentia ex maleficio, impotence by sorcery. But here is what the records capture. This trial would trigger a chain of events that would tear Castile apart, spark a succession war, and ultimately bring Isabella and Ferdinand to power, changing the course of world history. To understand how a prince ended up in court, with prostitutes defending his manhood, we need to step back to 1436. Europe's kingdoms were chess pieces, and marriage was the ultimate diplomatic move. Castile and Navarre had been bleeding each other dry in border conflicts. The Treaty of Toledo offered a solution straight from the medieval playbook. Unite the kingdoms through marriage. Prince Henry of Castile would marry Princess Blanche of Navarre. On paper it was perfect. Their children would inherit both kingdoms. Peace would reign. But there was one problem nobody saw coming. September 16th, 1440. The Cathedral of Valladolid. 15-year-old Prince Henry stood at the altar, gangly, awkward, already showing signs of the strange ailments that would plague him, chronic headaches, kidney problems, and what court physicians delicately called melancholic humours. Across from him stood 16-year-old Blanche, everything a medieval princess should be, educated, poised, from the sophisticated French-descended house of Évreux. She spoke 4 languages and had been trained since childhood to be a queen. The ceremony was magnificent. Cardinal Juan de Cervantes himself officiated. Gold thread glimmered on every surface. The combined nobility of 2 kingdoms filled the cathedral. Blanche's mother, Queen Blanche I of Navarre, watched with satisfaction. This marriage was her diplomatic masterpiece. But then came the wedding night, where medieval royal marriages got deeply uncomfortable by modern standards. This wasn't a private affair. Royal consummation was practically a state event. Nobles, bishops, physicians, and ladies of the court would gather outside the bedchamber. Some would even remain inside, witnesses to ensure the marriage was legally binding through physical union. The crowd outside Henry and Blanche's chamber that night included, according to one chronicler, nobles, favourites, bishops, doctors, maids, even jesters. They waited for the traditional display of bloodied sheets that would confirm the marriage was complete. They waited all night. By morning, the whispers had started. The prince had been unable to perform. Some said he froze with terror at the crowd of witnesses. Others noticed how he'd barely looked at his bride during the ceremony. Physicians were called in to examine both parties. Their conclusion was diplomatically vague. The union remains incomplete. Queen Blanche tried to smooth things over. "These things happen with young couples," she assured the court. "Give them time." But she had to return to Navarre, and within a year she was dead, possibly poisoned, though nothing was ever proven. Young Blanche was now alone in Castile, married to a prince who wouldn't touch her. Meanwhile, across the Pyrenees, Blanche's father, John II of Aragon, who also ruled Navarre through his late wife, was already making new plans. He had remarried to Juana Enriquez and had a new son, a boy named Ferdinand, who would one day reshape Spain. But from Blanche's perspective, in 1441, she didn't know she was already becoming expendable. For the next 12 years, Henry and Blanche lived out one of history's strangest royal marriages. They shared a palace, but not a bed. They appeared together at state functions, but exchanged barely a word. Blanche attended Mass every morning at dawn. praying for a miracle that never came. Henry spent his nights everywhere except with his wife. Court chronicler Alonso de Palencia later wrote bluntly, Henry showed the most extreme abhorrence toward Blanche. But here's what doesn't add up. Henry wasn't abstaining from women entirely. His confessor left a remarkable record, repeatedly admonishing Henry to stop visiting any bed other than your marital one. The future king was actively sleeping with other women while his wife remained untouched. Servants whispered about late-night visits to certain chambers. Guards were paid to look the other way. By 1445, 5 years into the marriage, desperation was setting in. The treatments Henry tried ranged from the medical to the mystical, and the absolutely bizarre. Italian physicians were summoned at enormous expense. They prescribed potions made from ground rhinoceros horn, smuggled from Africa at tremendous cost. Henry drank them dutifully. Nothing. Then came the aphrodisiacs. Court records show purchases of massive quantities of cinnamon, ginger, and something called dragon's blood. Actually tree resin, but marketed as a miracle cure. Henry consumed so much that courtiers joked he reeked of spices. Still nothing. The treatments got progressively more extreme. One account describes Henry applying caustic ointments to his genitals, leaving him with chemical burns so severe he couldn't ride a horse for weeks. Another chronicle, disturbingly, claims Henry would lie naked on top of Blanche while servants flogged his buttocks until they bled, hoping pain might provoke arousal. Imagine being Princess Blanche during these treatments. A teenage girl raised in the cultured court of Navarre, now subjected to humiliating medical rituals. She had to participate while maintaining royal composure in public. But Blanche wasn't entirely passive. In 1447, she did something unexpected. A letter discovered in the Vatican's secret archives in 1898, dated March 1447, was written in Blanche's own hand to Pope Nicholas V. She wasn't asking for an annulment. She was asking for intervention. Most Holy Father, she wrote, I fear not for my soul, but for my husband's. There are those in this court who whisper of dark practices, of ceremonies conducted at midnight, of pacts made with forces that should not be named. I beg your holiness to send your most trusted investigators. She was accusing someone of literally cursing her marriage. The Pope never responded, or if he did, the letter was destroyed. But 3 months later, something significant happened at the Castilian court. The court magician, yes, there was an official court magician, was quietly dismissed and fled to Morocco. His rooms were searched and sealed. Whatever was found inside was burned in the courtyard while priests chanted exorcism prayers. Was Henry actually cursed? From a modern perspective, of course not. But in the 15th century, this was a legally valid explanation, and more importantly, it gave everyone an out. Henry could claim he wasn't naturally impotent, just supernaturally prevented from consummating this specific marriage. The Church could grant an annulment without setting a precedent that might threaten other royal unions. And Blanche? Her opinion was about to stop mattering entirely. By 1451, the political ground had shifted. Her father, John II, was now at war with his own son, Blanche's brother Charles, Prince of Viana. Castile had chosen sides, backing Charles against John, which meant Blanche went from being a diplomatic bridge to being the daughter of an enemy. The timing of what happened next was no coincidence. In January 1453, just months after Castilian forces backed Prince Charles, Henry formally petitioned for annulment. The woman who had been his wife for 13 years was now a political liability. But Henry couldn't simply discard her. This required legal justification. Canon law was clear. A marriage could only be annulled for specific reasons. Non-consummation was one of them, but it had to be proven. Which brings us to that courtroom in Segovia. May 3rd, 1453, the ecclesiastical court convened in the Cathedral of Segovia. Presiding was Bishop Luis Vasquez de Acuña, carefully chosen for his loyalty to Prince Henry. The gallery was packed with nobles, all pretending to be there for religious purposes, all actually there for the most sensational trial of the century. Blanche entered first, 29 years old, still beautiful despite years of humiliation, wearing a simple black dress that emphasized her dignity. She was made to stand, not sit, before the tribunal. The first question was brutal in its directness. "Do you swear before God and these witnesses that you remain a virgin and untouched?" "I so swear," she replied, but swearing wasn't enough. The court appointed a panel of matrons, older noblewomen considered beyond reproach, to conduct a physical examination. Blanche was taken to a side chamber. We don't know the details, thankfully, but we know the conclusion. The matrons confirmed to the court that the Princess of Navarre, after 13 years of marriage, showed all the physical signs of virginity. One of the matrons later wrote in her private journal, "The princess bore this trial with such grace that we who examined her wept." Then came Henry's turn, but the Prince of Asturias had orchestrated something unprecedented. Instead of defending himself against the charge of impotence, he would prove selective impotence. Enter the prostitutes of Segovia. We know 3 of their names from court records: Mariela Flores, Catalina de Sandoval, and Beatriz, called La Portuguesa. These weren't random streetwalkers. They were established courtesans who serviced the nobility, women who understood discretion and politics. Each testified separately, but their stories aligned perfectly. Too perfectly, some noted. Mariela Flores spoke first. The court recorder, clearly uncomfortable, abbreviated her testimony in the official record, but others recorded more details. She described encounters with the prince in graphic detail, times, places, specific acts that proved his capability. She even mentioned a birthmark on his thigh that only an intimate partner would know. Catalina de Sandoval went further. She brought receipts, actual documentation of payments from the royal treasury for services to the household. The implication was clear. The crown was officially paying for the prince's extramarital activities. But it was Beatriz La Portuguesa who delivered the killing blow. She testified that the prince had explicitly told her during one of their encounters that he felt free and capable with anyone except his wife, that with Blanche it was as if iron chains bound his desires. The prosecution, if you could even call it that, presented this as proof of supernatural interference. Only sorcery could explain such selective dysfunction. Bishop Vasquez de Acuna had heard enough. But Henry had one more surprise witness.